I'm Laura. I'm here representing the Greater Brooklyn Intergenerational Village, and we are a part of a movement of villages around the country that are grassroots organizations helping support people aging in community. And our group has had kind of a series of conversations around end of life. One was about kind of values and choices around healthcare directives, things like that. And then we recently had one on actually the nuts and bolts of advanced directives. And now we're getting to the really very end, which is what we do after we die. And so we've
Yeah.
had a bit of interest in the idea of green burial, and I asked the death doula at Congressional Cemetery, who does wonderful programming around this, and she referred me to Lily, who's kindly joining us tonight to share her great expertise in this area. So, gonna turn it over to Lily. I do want everyone to know that um,
Recording?
we are recording. I feel like I just let someone in and I don't see them. Oh, there
Yeah,
we
I
are.
thought I did as well.
Oh, here she is, Lisa Hamilton. Welcome. So yes, we are recording the presentation. And if people feel comfortable being on the recording, asking questions, please feel free to do so. If not, what we'll do after the main body of presentation, we'll turn off the recording and have more of a discussion. All
And
right.
if you have a question that is pertinent to the slide we're on and you feel comfortable, feel free just to chime in. Okay, so thank you all for having me. I'm excited to be here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, natural burial. I It's always been my favorite families, I will say, when I'm, working in death care, serving families, they tend to be the natural burial folks or my green families, as I like to call them. They're always a little bit more hands-on, a little more participatory, and I just, they're kind of troublemakers sometimes, but it's always fun and always worth it. So we will get started. So, a little bit about me. Laura mentioned that the death doula at Congressional Cemetery, also named Laura, um, we I was there as director of burials for about 3 years, and before that, I was a mortician working in local funeral homes. I've worked and served D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. And as I've mentioned, I've always loved helping families figure out how to get this green burial that they want, or get something that they want that feels like they're going upstream or is a little bit out of the norm. I love to say yes to families like that. Um, and I've been doing a lot of advocacy the past couple of years. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but I have a business partner. We are working on launching a funeral home that will be focused on giving families green options. Um, and a couple of years ago, well, it took us a couple of years, we got a law passed in Maryland that will be able to bring more green options to this area. So we will talk about that. But I live in DC. I've got 2 kids, and I'm a mortician, and I love working with families and helping them kind of sort through the messiness of death care as much as possible. A lot of these photos are from Congressional Cemetery, I will say. Um, so the goal today, I can't resist just doing a little bit of very practical death education. We're going to talk about green burial. We're going to talk about emerging options coming soon. But I do really like for people to feel empowered when this thing happens. So I was watching, I think it was the Golden Globes that was on maybe a week or so ago, and they did one of their, in memoriam uh, things where they're just flashing the people who died that year and showing their pictures. And you're like, for me, even though I work in death, it's every now and then it still just hits you that we're all going to die. And it's still always hard to get your head around. So I like to talk a little bit about like what are these first phone calls you're making? What kind of basic information do you need? And that way you can kind of navigate it a little bit better. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about green burial, of course. And then I love for people just to have a general idea for what they think they want and a backup plan. Tell your people in your life, write this stuff down, have a plan, keep it in a file. We'll talk about that. And these are the beautiful Taiwanese cherry trees that bloom first before the Kwanzans bloom at Congressional Cemetery. If anybody's ever walked, this would be like late March, probably. Those are the first ones that bloom there. Okay, so I think what gets written about in death a lot are things like, the mushroom suit or getting shot out of a cannon. But in my experience, cremated remains shot out of a cannon. My experience is that most people aren't looking for those options. And so I just want you to have a general sense of what do I think I want? And like with my own family, they know I'm into, oh, I like this and I like that. But I also tell them it's in my will. If you need to just cremate me, please do that because death is hard enough. It's hard on your family. And I, give them permission to completely pivot if they need to. But have one or two things in mind you think you would be comfortable with that suits you in terms of how you've lived your life. So if you want to take a minute just to envision maybe somebody in your life that you think this could apply to, it could be somebody that that is ailing, or somebody who you think this could apply to. But think of your person, and a lot of where you die determines who you call first. So if you are fortunate enough to be at home on hospice care, your first call is to that hospice nurse. They will come out, in the middle of the night. They will come out to pronounce you. After you've been pronounced, that is when you can call the funeral home. If you're at a nursing home or an assisted living facility, uh, they're going to have a nurse on staff who would be able to pronounce you, or a physician. And then you can call your funeral home. If you're at the hospital, obviously you're going to be, there's going to be people there who can pronounce you. But the key part is when you're under medical care, somebody pronounces you first. If you're not under medical care, if it's unattended, meaning there's no physician, or it's an accidental death, something is perhaps unnatural, that's when the police have to be called. And so what I like people, sometimes we know people who are like fiercely independent, even in their late 90s, they don't even go to the doctor. They're fine. That's that that's okay. That's okay. But if you have somebody who is ailing and is at home, even if they don't feel like they want to be on hospice, because a lot of times people think that means you're giving up. Hospice is a benefit that we all are paying into, and at a certain point in our lives, you may qualify for, and you should tap into that benefit. Even if you don't utilize all of it, tap into the benefit. Because what happens is you're going to have, somebody, a nurse who comes by once a week. You'll have a social worker in your life. You'll have a chaplain. They'll be managing your medications. And if you're at home, when you pass, you can call hospice. If you're unattended, you don't have any medical supervision, that's when you're going to have to call the police. It's just a different experience for your family. The police have to come out. They have to treat this like a scene, even though it very well not feel at all like any sort of a crime scene. It probably feels just like someone's living room, right? But they have to come and make sure, okay, who's going to sign the death certificate? What kind of medication was this person on? Are they under any medical care? And if you're really not, that's when you may have to go and have an autopsy done. And it's not the end of the world, but it does add some extra layers, and it's a little, it's harder on your family. So, if you have a terminal diagnosis, if you have something major going on, consider seeing if you qualify for hospice, really and truly. Oh, this is Glenwood Cemetery, which is right off of North Capitol Street. Um, this is one of my it's an interesting cemetery because they honor the dead trees by having this chainsaw artist come out and carve um, really neat tree carving. So if you're ever in that neck of the woods, I highly recommend. Do you have to be picked up right away after death? If you're at a nursing home, sometimes people live at nursing homes for years, right? And then when you die, you have to be picked up a lot of times in like 3 to 4 hours. That feels very fast, right? So a lot of times people don't know that. So if you have somebody in your life in a nursing home, I would ask that question about how long do you typically give families? 3 to 4 hours is pretty typical. If you're under hospice care, you can call the hospice nurse. They'll come out, they'll pronounce you, and then you can say, okay, we're going to call the funeral home, but we don't want them to come to do transport until 5 o'clock tonight. Or we're waiting on a friend who's coming in to say goodbye and they won't be here for a few hours. You can take your time. A lot of times people feel that the minute somebody dies, they have to be picked up. If you're at home, you have a little bit more power, and um, if you're comfortable and if you want that extra time, take it, because it's really, to me, very special, kind of sacred time. When somebody is at home and your family's there with you, they're kind of all yours in that moment. There's nobody else really there. And it's special time. Um, you can do things like, okay, give them their final little kind of wipe down and maybe help them put on their favorite, jammies, or dress them. You can bathe them. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but you can take that special time if you want. Now, sometimes somebody has been dying for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and you are exhausted beyond belief and you haven't slept in so long, and you need nothing more than that person to be picked up right away. And that is okay too. But if you're up for it and you want to take that time, take that time. It's special time. DC and Virginia hospitals are pretty flexible with families, and so they don't have a set time limit. If you die in a Maryland hospital, they are very by the books. You have basically 3 days to select a funeral home, and then you will be sent to the state anatomy board. They will keep you there for a couple of weeks typically, and if they still haven't sorted out who's handling disposition, they will handle cremation basically at the Maryland state level. DC and Virginia is a little bit more flexible. They don't have that hard rule like that. Does anybody have any questions before I keep going? Okay. These are the questions the funeral home is going to ask you. These are not the only ones, but your vital statistic information. I can share this offline, with Laura afterwards, but I will tell you that for years, for talking with people on the phone, you think your kids, know all your basic information. Often they don't, or they're so tired and so sad they can't remember the things they know. So people know their mom's birthday, but gosh, right after she dies, they just they can't think of it, or they cannot remember a maiden name to save their life. I don't know why, but make sure this is these are some of the things you want to have written down in your file. Just make it really easy because this is the personal information that will go on the death certificate. The physician is completing the medical information. You have to provide that personal information, and then the funeral director files that information. They're going to send you a proof. Check it. Get a friend to check it because again, you're tired, you're sad. You know, in some states, Maryland makes it pretty easy to make a change. DC and Virginia make it a little bit harder to make a change, but you can amend something there if there is something wrong. This, I forgot that there's movement on some of these slides. This is there a chat question? Do we? No, I thought there was. Okay. This is Frederick Douglass's death certificate. This is a DC death certificate here. Most families can get away with about 10 death certificates. Some people, if you have really simplified your assets, could, maybe only have 5 or 6, but most people need about 10. If you have a lot of property, you have a lot of assets, you could need as many as 20. I would say get a few more than you think you need. Not every single institution is going to insist on an original death certificate. Some will take a copy, but some will want that original. Social media accounts, it's hard to imagine that, to close your Facebook page, you may need a death certificate, but a lot of times they do ask for a copy of a death certificate if you want to close it.
Lily,
Yes.
is that provided by the funeral home then, the death certificates?
Yes.
Okay.
So, yes, so like for example, there's an electronic death registration system basically in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And the funeral director is the one who is actually filing that death certificate. So they're waiting on the physician to enter the cause of death, and then they're entering all your personal information, and then they file that with the state. Then we will go and pick them up from the vital records department and then have them at the funeral home for you to pick up.
Okay.
Of course, each jurisdiction charges a different price. Virginia's are $12, DC's are 18, and Montgomery County is 18 for the first death certificate and 20 for each additional. They're not cheap, but they're necessary. Somehow, here we go. So in terms of, we're going to talk a little bit about types of funeral homes. There's such a range in this area. You have places that do what we call direct cremation, which is just a simple cremation with no funeral service. Some places specialize in that. Other places offer very full, very traditional funeral services with, beautiful buildings and beautiful facilities. And so what you need is going to help you determine who you should call. And we'll talk a little bit about how do you figure out if you have a funeral home that is friendly to green burial. And I mean, I like families to start telling them what they want right away. We don't want embalming. We're planning to do a home vigil. We want a delayed transfer, meaning come pick up, my family member later after they've died. And you kind of know right away if you're getting hesitation or, oh, I'm not really sure how that works, or if, oh, yeah, okay, we can do that. And so I think that's when you want to have kind of top of mind, this is what we're hoping to do here, and you're going to know right away. But with that said, I do have some other clues. I mean, you have corporate funeral homes, you have more family-owned funeral homes. Any funeral home can do green burial, but some work those green burial muscles more frequently than others. So we'll talk about those funeral homes. But if you need a parking lot, you want to, you want it to be really friendly for people with mobility issues. Um, if you want people to be able to drive there and park in the city, that's a little bit harder, but if those things are important to you, you may be calling a different level of service funeral home. This is a picture of Saul Levinson's funeral home, which is a beautiful funeral home up in Pikesville, um, near Baltimore, actually. They do service the whole area. They are a traditional Jewish funeral home, but they also are really great with helping green burial families. Um, it's green burial, and we haven't even really talked about what that is. It's really original burial before embalming, burial before we had uh, grave liners required at most cemeteries. Your body is not embalmed; it is placed in a casket made of natural material, or perhaps just a shroud, and any funeral home can do that. Any funeral home can just handle bathing and dressing and not embalming. Any funeral can order what we call a plain pine box, that simple wooden box. All funeral homes can do that. But some may say, "Oh, well, you need this or you need that, or and so Jewish funeral homes are very accustomed to not embalming. So typically, if a family reaches out, I see that that goes well, but there's also others. So let's talk about embalming. This is a battlefield embalming photo, which was probably taken by Matthew Brady's photographers, and Matthew Brady is buried at Congressional Cemetery. He was a Civil War photographer, and he captured all these images of the Civil War. Pretty much any picture you've ever seen of Frederick Douglass or Abraham Lincoln or Frederick Douglass's wife Anna um, were taken by Matthew Brady, and he thought the U.S. government was going to buy all his photos, and they bought none. He died totally penniless. He is buried in a friend's plot at the cemetery. And he really did not become appreciated or well known until long after he died. So this photo is probably a Matthew Brady photo, and it's from the Library of Congress. And the the embalmer in the photo is Dr. Richard Burr, and he was known as the father of embalming. Um, but embalming has changed since then, but the basics are they're still in place. You're draining the blood from the body, and um, you're using the arteries in the body to inject typically formaldehyde or a glutaraldehyde. These are um, chemicals that fix your proteins. I like to think about it as frying an egg. You start with something that's kind of soft and you apply that heat to it, and those proteins and that egg become transformed and it gets firmed up. That's kind of what happens to us with embalming. You are fixing the proteins in your body, and it's a way to preserve the body. Um, but is it required? No, it is never required. With international transport, I'll say domestic transport, it's never required. It's never required to go to any cemetery. It's never required to go to any funeral home. If you are transporting somebody overseas, it's very country dependent. Of course, if you're going to Israel, there is no embalming. Other countries, it's very, very specific based on the country. And if you are funeral directors help transport people all over the world, um, and you'll find out if you are transporting overseas, exactly those countries' requirements. So, um, what I will tell you is some funeral homes will say, if you want a public open casket viewing, we require embalming. but it's never required by law. So if you pick a certain type of funeral service, you may be told, look, you have to be embalmed. Um, have I ever gone to church with somebody who was not embalmed and had an open casket? I have. It sort of ruffles, I mean, my colleagues would often advise against that. It really depends on the family, the person. Every body is different when we die. We all, if you've been in the hospital for months and maybe you've been receiving a lot of fluid and you have a lot of edema on your body, I mean, you may not be the best candidate for that. But sometimes if you've been on hospice, you're at home, you may have not eaten in a few weeks, you could have a more cooperative body. So you just kind of don't know exactly what kind of body you're going to have. And you have to get to know the family and talk to them and try to figure out if it's possible. Um, so direct cremation, we'll talk a little bit about that. This is a great fallback for you can't get exactly what you planned for at death and you want something that is affordable. Um, I'll tell you, I just did a study of about 25 local funeral homes in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, just close in the DMV. The average price for direct cremation was like $2,700. There is a funeral home in DC that is quoting people $9,000 for a direct cremation. You don't need to pay $9,000 for a direct cremation. They do have beautiful facilities, but if you're looking for a simple cremation, you do not need that. If you end up with a funeral home, let's say, we do have people who somebody dies unexpectedly. Maybe the police officer says, oh, here, call these people. And then their person is taken to that funeral home. The next day they get the price list and they can't believe how much it's going to cost. You can change funeral homes. You would have to pay for that initial transport fee to take somebody from the place of death to the funeral home, but you could call another funeral home and start over. So you're not trapped if you feel like you've gone down the wrong path. You can make a change. Um, Direct cremation, it does not mean it can't be special. What it means is you're not relying on the funeral home to make it special for you. You may be relying on your family and your community. And so we'll talk a little bit about what you can do to take a very affordable cremation and make it special. Can you make it special? Yes. Um, so a couple of things you can do here. One is you can have that delayed transfer and almost have like your own little family vigil right at home, right there. If somebody's at home, they died at hospice, you can gather, you can be together. I've had people's grandchildren write them letters to tuck in their in their grandma's pocket. I've had people, especially during COVID, so many people just couldn't be with their person. I had people email from all over the world what they wanted to tell this person who had died. And I printed out all those letters, and this person was draped in these memories and words, and they went to the crematory blanketed in the people who loved them's words. That is special, right? And that was just a simple direct cremation. So, yes, you can make it special. Um, I do have the permission to show the photo at the bottom with Donald and William. So many things I witnessed, I can't like take a picture of, and sometimes you witness such amazing things in humanity and you want to share it. But this was such a sweet story. It was around the holidays, and um, these guys, they were married, and one had died many years before the other, and they were finally going to be interred in their niche together. And the person who was coordinating everything, who was really a friend of theirs, showed up with like giant urns, and there was no way they were going to fit in the niche, like no way. And so, and luckily she came really early and she was really calm and cool about it all. Like a lot of people would have been freaking out, and her calm made me, not freak out, because I felt like, okay, I don't, I didn't want to like look them down, but it was totally out of my control. And so I said, why don't you go back to their house and just look for something that's soft, look for something we could just take the cremated remains, the bags, and we'll pull them out of these giant urns, and we'll just place them inside something soft, and it will fit in their niche, and just see what you can find. And she came back with their Christmas stockings. So it was like better than an urn, A lot of times you have something really special at home that you don't know that it could be an urn. An urn does not always have to be an urn. So, um, one woman, she knitted this macrame, net to put around the urn so that it could be lowered into the ground that way. That was very sweet. Um, but you can memorialize your person outside of it happening in a funeral home, of course. And I'm sorry for all the funeral homes out there, but anyway, well, not that sorry. Okay, so cremation. It's simple, it's affordable. Your family who lives overseas and they need to wait to come in town until the holidays, they can do that. Like that's why people like cremation. It's also, I think a lot of the cremation rates that have been increasing over this past decades, really. I think some of it is really a repudiation of what families are just tired of, and they don't want to do the same old, same old. They feel like everything is too much. And so they're like, let's just do a simple cremation and we'll do whatever we want on our own. I think that's a big reason why people are really into cremation right now. With that said, for every cremation that happens, we know that at a minimum, there's about 500 pounds of carbon dioxide that gets released into our atmosphere. So, um, this is sort of me quoting Katrina Spade, who we'll talk about. She's the woman who created natural organic reduction, which is what people often call human composting. And she says something along the lines of most people on this planet don't want their last act on Earth to be one that pollutes it. A lot of cemeteries, not Congressional Cemetery, but a lot of cemeteries, they want their ground perfectly flat. They want it green, manicured. That picture is of Gate of Heaven. That cemetery, that's a Catholic cemetery that's just up Georgia Avenue. Um, and that is a burial vault that they had out of the ground. This was during COVID, and they had very kind of odd rules then, but it's a good image of a vault because a lot of times the vault's already in the ground when you get to the cemetery, so you don't actually see what a burial vault looks like. But what 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 people are starting to realize, especially people who have been maybe composting their food, maybe recycling, thinking about getting an electric vehicle, maybe putting solar panels on your house. You have all these things you try to do in your life to try to be a good steward of the environment. And then when it comes to your death, people haven't always had the options they've wanted. So it's kind of a long sentence, but you think about all the wood that's going to make the caskets that's then put into the ground, and all of the cement that's being used around those caskets that's also going into the ground, and all of those gallons of embalming fluid that have been put into our bodies, to fix our proteins. And it does feel like a lot of waste, right? So I think a lot of people are looking for other options. And then modern crematories, they are pretty efficient. Cremation is not the worst thing in the world, but we do want other options on the table. 500 pounds of carbon dioxide per cremation is a lot when you start to think about the fact that about 80% of Americans will be choosing cremation in just a few years. It's a high number. So we do want to think about other options. Here's that. This is from the National Funeral Directors Association. Um, it's about by 2040 that you're going to see it get to that 80% number. In certain states, it's already much higher than that. In the South, it still hovers closer into like the 40, 50%, depending on how traditional certain areas are with funeral service. So I want to show some images of green burial, and I can't show I can't show shrouded people, but I'll show you some caskets. The burial on the left, that is a green burial. That is just a simple pine box. The person inside of there was not involved. And at Congressional Cemetery, you do not have to have the grave liner. You don't have to have a vault or a grave liner. You can place the casket directly in the earth. And that is what that looks like. The center photo, you can see that that is a nice wooden casket and that it is in that, it's in a grave liner. A lid would then be placed on it afterwards, which is what you see in that next photo there. So the one on the left would be considered green burial. The ones in the middle and the right are less green. There are many shades of green. So I will they all have a few things in common. One is that you are not embalmed. Your body would be placed in a simple wooden casket or a shroud of natural material. And hopefully, if your cemetery permits it, you would have no grave liner. Most cemeteries require a grave liner. If you already have a plot at a particular cemetery, you can try to be as green as you want. You may still have to follow some of their house rules, and most cemeteries do require that grave liner or a vault. So it'd really be like if you already have your plot, be as green as you can if it's important to you, right? Um, or if you're interested in natural burial cemeteries, there are some now, which is really great, and we will talk about them. This picture is a congressional cemetery picture. Um, a lot of the green burial that I was doing there, it's really you're learning as you go because it's not a real common thing that people do. And so this was one of my early setups. I got better over time, but always playing. Some cemeteries, if it's a real true natural green cemetery, they don't allow a traditional headstone or marker. You may just have like a natural marker. A cemetery like Congressional Cemetery is considered a hybrid cemetery because it permits very traditional burial and green burial. And that's what makes it very unique. You could have a totally green burial there and a very traditional headstone. This is an image of a green burial there. And so you see the straps that are coming across the grave there. This was one that was going to be hand lowered. Not all cemeteries will let you do that. And I will tell you every time it's terrifying. But it's also beautiful. But as your funeral director, you never feel good until everyone is safely down and safely away from the grave. Um, so in this case, there was a wicker casket I'm going to show you an image of that was placed on top of these boards. And then all those straps were lifted up and the long slats were pulled out from underneath. And then the person was slowly lowered down. It is really beautiful. I think for every family, you have to make sure everyone's really on board because you're so emotional. I mean, some people are almost just completely paralyzed by their grief on the day of a funeral. And so to have the responsibility of also lowering your person into the ground, it could be too much. So I think these are it makes death much more intimate, but there is a weight on your people. So I think that it's something you want to talk about. So many people would just be so absolutely honored, or you might need to have a few people who are ready to step in if you're like, I just can't do this. Um, Important conversations to have with your family. This does not look like a green burial setup at all, but this is a green burial. You can see our apiary boxes in the background. I say our, I still feel so connected to Congressional Cemetery. They harvest honey in the fall there, and so those are the bee boxes. But this was also a green burial, but it had a very traditional setup. But this person was not embalmed. They were in a natural casket, and that's still a green burial. So there's many shades of green. I think one of the biggest questions I get is, do I have to be buried immediately? No, you don't have forever. But, I think the idea that it has to happen in 24 or 48 hours, that's really not true. And it rarely happens that quickly. After somebody dies, you're typically waiting a day or 2 days for a doctor to sign a death certificate. You may be coordinating with your family members who are coming in from out of town. You may be coordinating with a place of worship. You may be trying to set up a luncheon for afterwards. All of those things can still happen with green burial. Your funeral home is going to have you in refrigeration. Refrigeration does wonders. It slows things down, and you have time. I've had people, I mean, it's not the norm, but I've had people wait a couple of weeks for a green burial, and it's okay. It really has been okay. Um, what I will tell you is if you want to see your person and you're not planning on doing any sort of preservation of your person, go see them right away. Because every day we change a little. We start getting dehydrated on our lips. We get dehydrated on the tip of our nose. You change a little bit every day after death. It's part of the natural process. So if you want to see that person, go see them right away. Even if you know you might not be having burial until next Friday, go see them if you need to see them. So can your family see you after you die? Yes, of course. And you should if you want to and you are able to. Can you go to a place of worship for a traditional viewing? This is really going to depend on the funeral home, the funeral director. It's going to depend on the condition of your body, and it's going to depend on that place of worship. So some of it would be, and so that's something that you'd be having those conversations after it happens. I think most of my green burial families, they don't, I would say in general, don't necessarily feel that need to have some sort of an open casket viewing. Um, for people who are interested in just being shrouded with no casket, it is beautiful. It is also very intimate. And so if you think about um, you as a pallbearer carrying somebody to the grave in a casket, you're putting your hand on those handles. Get handles. Always get handles, please. Very important. Even in a plain bind box, get handles. But if somebody is shrouded, and there are beautiful natural burial shrouds that have handles on them, they're sturdy, but it is different when you are carrying somebody who is just shrouded. It is much more intimate. And so that's something you kind of want to think through. Are your people going to be okay with that? Plant the seeds and talk about it. And maybe they're like, yes, it is. Um, I I'm thinking of a family who this was I'm going to tell you, well, I'll tell you two things. One is some green burial families, what I've noticed, I've seen when I've had particularly women who die young of cancer, who have been through so much with having chemicals put in their body to try to keep them alive. In death, they are like, I want it as natural as possible. It's like a way to kind of reclaim all of the things you couldn't control in your disease. And I had a family, this was for a young woman who did die of cancer. And I was at first told, just bury her and we'll come later. We don't want to be there for the burial. And I said, oh, okay, if that, there's a helicopter going over my house right now. I'm sorry. Um, I said, at first I said, okay. I'm always sort of willing to say yes, but I was really worried that they were going to be missing something that they might not even know they needed. And so we just kept talking and I kind of kept planting seeds about, are you sure? Are you sure? And it went from them not really being sure they wanted to be present to actually we do want to be present and she was going to be just shrouded and we want to help lower her and we want so they like completely changed within a course of a week about what they thought they wanted. And what I'll tell you is they felt like it was so healing to be present, to help and to participate. And it was sort of like tucking her in one more time is sort of how it was described to me, which is so beautiful. So I think participation and action in grief can be so incredibly healing for a family. And I see that a lot with the green burial families is that they really want to do something with that sadness they're feeling. Here are a couple of options. Some are local and some are just kind of well-known natural brands. Passages. Passages started in New Mexico, gosh, I don't know, maybe 20 or something, 20 years ago. Their CEO is, I think he's like a Time Person of the Year this year, but they do all of these natural um, caskets, willow caskets, seagrass woven caskets. They have burial shrouds, that carrying tray that's sort of at the top right part of the screen. It's like a lidless casket. And so if you can imagine just a shrouded person in this beautiful carrying tray, that is a great way to sort of have a shrouded person and you have a little bit of stability around them so it's not quite as intimate. Um, that is just beautiful when it's blanketed in flowers and it's a lovely option. Titan caskets, which is like the casket disruptor in the funeral world right now. They even sell a simple plain pine box. I know you guys have probably heard like Costco. Yes, they sell them. Um, Funeral homes have to, by law, accept a third party casket. They cannot charge you any kind of what I call a corkage fee. They can't charge, you have to accept it. They have to. And some funeral homes will try to say, well, you have to be there when it's delivered and you have to confirm, that it's what you want and all of that. They're not really even permitted to do that. So yes, you can order a casket there's a place called Overnight Caskets. You can go to Costco. You can do that and have it sent to the funeral home and they have to use it. Now, if you tell a funeral home you're thinking about doing that, they may say, well, tell me how much you wanted to spend. Okay, let me see what I can do. I mean, some funeral homes might work with you on that. For shrouds, a shroud that has what's called a backboard is really great for a natural burial. It gives your body some stability. If you can imagine, when we're not embalmed, we're not firm. We can kind of flop around a little bit and we want to have a graceful visual experience for everybody. So having a shroud with a backboard is great. But if you don't, like in my green burial setups, that was why I had that piece of plywood going across those planks. It's to bring stability to somebody who is just going to be shrouded and lowered. Reside Burials is that's a Baltimore shroud maker. They also hand make caskets as well. Any questions before I keep going here? You guys doing okay? Okay. So where can you get natural burial in our area? Of course, you've been looking at a lot of images of Congressional Cemetery. Congressional Cemetery is really the only option in DC proper where you can get a natural burial. However, I am so excited to be able to finally say that Reflection Park, which is just in Silver Spring, just opened. They've been trying to open for almost 5 years. Montgomery County is very by the book, as a lot of people know, and it just took them a really long time to get all the permits they needed to be able to open. What I love about Reflection Park, first of all, I love the people behind it. It was started by a former NIH physician, and he was sort of blown away when his father died. He's of the Islamic faith, and he could not believe how hard it was to find a cemetery that was affordable that would let him have a natural burial. And it just bothered him. And for years, he thought about what could he do about it. And he ended up creating Reflection Park. It took a long time for it to happen, but they have 40 acres in Silver Spring. It is a, interfaith nonprofit cemetery, very hard. Congressional is a nonprofit cemetery. Reflection Park's a nonprofit cemetery. There are very few nonprofit cemeteries. So I'm a fan. They're doing really beautiful work there. They're being so kind to families. And it's really neat to have this be a resource to the community. Um, Garden of Remembrance, which is a traditional Jewish cemetery in Clarksburg, they have an interfaith section for green burial. So that's an option. If you're wanting to take a beautiful drive out to Berryville, Virginia, there is a monk-run cemetery. It's technically connected to the Catholic Church. It's beautiful out there, and they've been doing green burial for a long time out there. Baltimore County, just about 2 years ago, their Serenity Ridge opened, and then there's one other one in Frederick. But just a couple of years ago, the only option was Congressional, and then the one out in Berryville, and there was nothing else. So it's really neat to see these other options come along for people. So what's coming? So in 2024, my business partner, Adrian Gardner, who's the top right of that screen in that green tie, it took us a couple of years, but we passed a bill in Maryland called the Green Death Care Options Act. Next to Adrian is Katrina Spade. She's the inventor of human composting. I'm in the center, and then just to the left of me is Sam Sieber, and it's her father and her who are running a beautiful water cremation company called BioResponse. And they really all came down to help advocate and celebrate when it finally passed. So it was very exciting for that to happen. And it took us a couple of years. It was interesting. I learned so much in that process. I mean, as a mortician, I've never been involved in getting a bill passed, but there was a lot of effort. We are still chipping away at making it legal in Maryland. Even though the law passed, we're still working through regulations with the Board of Morticians and the Office of Cemetery Oversight so that people can actually be issued licenses to offer these options. So we're going to talk about what was included in the Green Death Care Options Act. Natural organic reduction. So this is sometimes called soil transformation. It's sometimes called human composting. But I'm going to show you some vessels, but you're taking your body, placing your body in a vessel with other plant material. And over time, your body gradually breaks down. It's faster than it would break down in the earth, much faster. And at the end of the process, your family is given your soil back. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. It is now legal in 14 states. Maryland was the eighth state, and there are many more states on considering bills right now, but it's pretty neat. It started in Washington State in 2019, so it's very, very new as far as death care goes. There's about five operators, mostly in Washington State, Oregon, and Colorado, who are offering natural organic reduction. A lot of times people say, is that just like, kind of throwing you out in the backyard? And no, that's not like that. It does use composting science, but it has been redesigned for humans. Katrina Spade, who started it, was actually an architecture major. She was getting a master's in architecture, I think from Amherst, and her project was on redesigning death. And she had been really into farming and composting. And she thought, well, why can't we do that with people? We should do this with people. And so she created this really beautiful way to do it. So you're looking at an array of her vessels. Her vessels are very beautiful. They're beautifully designed vessels. But your body is basically placed in this is like a stainless steel kind of metal tray. You're surrounded with alfalfa and wood chips and plant material and a very natural shroud. And you are placed inside this vessel. The door is closed. It remains closed until your organic material has been consumed. So it depends a little bit on your body size, but it takes about 30 days for the first phase of the process, which is where your body is breaking down. And then the second phase of the process is called the curing phase. And that is where it's like the soil is maturing and kind of stabilizing and getting it safer, ready for plant material so that you could use it in your garden. Um, so let's see, I wanted to tell you something else about that. One thing that is really neat, I don't know if you guys compost, but people talk about their compost piles heating up. And that happens. It happens naturally. And that's part of the process that kills all the pathogens in your body. So all of the states that have passed it have, pretty strict guidelines about how they have to test for salmonella, E. coli, there's a long list, certain metals, mercury, arsenic, it goes on. There's sampling that is happening that has to then be sure that this is good, nutrient rich soil. But after, let's see here, in the beginning, your body breaks down pretty quickly. You're monitoring for temperature, moisture, oxygen, but the heat that happens inside that vessel is all natural. So once that vessel reaches 131 degrees for 72 hours, that is what's going to kill all those pathogens. And then over time, the vessels gets turned a little bit. It keeps getting turned. And when it stops heating up, that's kind of when that's when they know you're done, more or less, that your body has, been consumed. People always want to know what happens to the bones. The bones actually remain. Our bones are so hard. So just like with the traditional fire cremation process, your bones they remain at the end of the process. Those bones are crushed up or pulverized and then placed in the urn. When people talk about getting their ashes back, they're not ashes. I mean, we use that word, but they're not ashes. They are your bones. In this process, your bones remain, and the same type of equipment that is used to help break down and crush up the bone at a traditional fire crematory is utilized here, and then it's mixed back in with the soil. So you are given back that soil. You get a lot of soil. It's about a truck bed of soil. Yeah, it's a lot. So for some people, like if we live in DC, we have small yards. It's hard for us to imagine that truck bed of soil. Uh, but this form of disposition was really designed with cities in mind. Katrina Spade designed it to be used in cities so that you wouldn't have to take up cemetery space, so that you wouldn't have to um, pollute our air with traditional cremation. And so there's a couple things families do. Some will say, oh, I only want half my soil, and could you please donate the rest of my soil to a conservation forest? So that's something that's being commonly done. Some people want all their soil back, and some people have like they'll have, they will bottle up their soil in lots of bags and give it to all their friends and family, and everybody gets, a little of your soil. Pricing for this is around $5,500 to $7,000. There's 4 operators: Recompose, Return Home, Earth Funeral, and the Natural Funeral. Earth Funeral is currently building a large human composting facility near Baltimore. So once those regulations are in place, that will be widely available here. But it's also still available. Recompose, Return Home, all of them will tell you right now a large percentage of the families that they're serving are coming to them from out of state. Anybody have any questions about human composting?
I do, Lily. Thank you for this. This is so much information and I love it. So, if I'm reading your slide right, the ones near Baltimore are not online yet. So, if, say, any of us died in the next week, our
Yeah.
family would have to be prepared to ship our bodies. Is that right? To like Washington, Oregon, Colorado?
Yeah. Yes, it does sound overwhelming. I will
Yeah.
say that, but
Okay.
it's something funeral directors do all the time. So,
Oh,
um, there would be, so that 5 to 7,000 does not include the plane ticket to Washington State. So you would have to include that. But um, you would call, basically, you would call a local funeral home and say, I need for you to transport me to Washington State. And in the funeral world, there's the forwarding funeral home and the receiving funeral home. So here you'd have somebody who picks you up from place of death, files your death certificate, arranges for the flight, and then transports you to one of these facilities for soil transformation. Getting
and
all
then
your soil back.
I was just going to
Yeah,
say, then your soil is in those states.
your soil's in those states. I've heard, fun stories where people have like rented a truck and they've made it like a family journey. Like, we're coming this summer, we're all going to go pick up mom together. And they've made it, this big, beautiful thing. For some people that would be a barrier. For others, it's like a fun adventure. So,
Okay. Thank you for
yes,
that.
good question. And I know this is a lot. Is everybody okay right now? Okay. Okay, so we've talked a lot about natural organic reduction already. I'll show you, it really does look like compost. And I've heard somebody ask Katrina Spade, who invented the process, like, aren't humans, don't we make like the best compost? And she's like, no, it's really just compost. Like it's good compost, but it's not extraordinary just because, we made it. Um, but your body goes, it's in a vessel, which is in a building. I feel like to the legislators, when we were trying to sell this crazy idea to them, it's like, no, this is happening in a building. There's no visual experience. It goes, the end of the process. Really, you are being given these kind of beautiful, beautiful bags of soil. The Maryland bill, we had to stipulate the first time around when it failed. They wanted us to add in that you could not sell the compost, that you could not grow plants, or grow plants, that you could not grow food with it. And that's added in. If you were to ask scientists, they'd say there's nothing technically wrong with growing food with this composted soil, but for the purposes of making it palatable to people, sure, just stick with ornamentals. Um, there's no laws in the books that don't say you can't, buy and sell cremated remains, but people just don't do it. So there were certain things like, oh, we have to write that in there. I mean, nobody who would sell cremated remains, but for this, because it is something like compost that I could see that, being a concern. It was a concern for legislators. So that was written into the law. Um, I don't know. It's a neat process. More coming. You're going to hear a lot more about it soon. I'm sure you'll start seeing all kinds of stuff from Earth Funeral because they're really making a big investment locally. Okay, water cremation. Water cremation has a very technical word, alkaline hydrolysis. This has been around for a lot longer. It's been around for about 30 years. Well, in the funeral home form. Prior to that, it was I think the patent is something like 1880. Um, but it started being used for humans in the funeral world about 30 years ago, in Gainesville, Florida. It's Sands Hospital, I believe, that started using their body donor program. That is how they implemented, I'm not saying this well, they replaced the fire cremation they were using at the end of their donor program with water cremation. So it is 90% more energy efficient than traditional fire cremation, and there are zero emissions. I think that's one of my favorite things about it. There are zero emissions. So how does this work? This is the machine you're looking at is the most common vessel that's out there in the marketplace. There are a couple other manufacturers. This is sort of the leading manufacturer. Your body is placed inside this kind of metal basket, and it goes inside the vessel. The vessel is filled, not completely, but it's filled with water, and it's 95% water and then 5% of basically a lye. Potassium hydroxide is the most common, so it's not acid, it's basic. 95% water, 5% of this potassium hydroxide, and then that water is heated. Traditional fire cremation is around 1600 degrees. This is much lower, around 300 degrees. It takes longer. It depends on the machine you have a little bit, but it could be anywhere from 4 hours to 8 hours. Some could take a little bit longer. Traditional fire cremation is typically a couple of hours. So this will be offered soon in the area, as soon as our regulators can decide on the regulations. But I mean, I was in a meeting just as recently as a couple days ago, where they're getting closer. So we are hopeful that in 2026, the regulations will be in place and that funeral homes will be able to offer this. But I don't know the whole scoop, but in DC, there's a bill. It has the exact same name. So I think someone was inspired by the Maryland bill and got a council member to present this as an option in DC. We'll see what happens behind it. And, a lot of things are up in the air with DC right now. And as we know, sometimes the bills they pass can be undone by other people. There was a medical aid in dying bill that's been available in DC for 10 years. They cannot pass this bill in Maryland. They try every year. But in DC, medical aid in dying, there was an attempt to undo this bill very recently by certain folks on a certain side of the aisle. And it didn't happen, thankfully, but it seemed like they were going to be able to undo that. So I am, medical aid in dying. I don't know. I just think I'm a proponent of that for sure. It has to be used carefully, but I'm a proponent of it. I've had a couple of cases, I've had somebody call me and say, I'm going to die next Saturday. And I'm like, okay, but let's talk about that. But it's 6 months of you have to have 6 months or less to live. You have to have multiple physicians sign off on this. And even with that, it's still very difficult to get a pharmacy to fulfill that prescription. But yeah. So Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, he used water cremation in 2021. He was a huge environmentalist, and I love I love this photo because like he was this giant of a human. And look at the most bare bones, simple casket. There's not even a skirt on the church truck, which is the cart we put the caskets on. It is as simple. I mean, that bouquet of flowers on his casket could not be more simple. And so he had a traditional gathering. And then after that, his body was taken out of this simple coffin and he used water cremation. At the end of the water cremation process, your family is returned an urn. So you get an urn, but it's 90% more energy efficient and there's no emissions. I think it could be a really nice option for families who who love the simplicity of cremation. Maybe you don't want to have a burial plot forever. You know, I mean, I think there's really a lot of nice things about it. This is Ruth Bader Ginsburg's purse. This was COVID times, and I took my kids out. Well, they were out. The kids didn't have school forever, right? But we went down there, and we just happened to stand in the right spot. It had nothing to do with me being in funeral service, and there they were. But so coming soon, at some point when we get our regulations straight in 2026, this is my fledgling funeral home that I um, hope I can't wait until it's been a long time coming to pass the laws. And we had to do a zoning amendment in Montgomery County this past year. We're trying to be as close to the DC line as possible. We did want the stability of passing the law, in a state where it couldn't be overturned, because we really wanted to make sure it could be available to families. But the plan is to be able to serve truly DC, Maryland, and Virginia families, and be a funeral home that is very friendly for families who want natural burial. Of course, water cremation, and then the soil transformation. So stay tuned. I see a typo on the slide. I see it. But stay tuned. So that's
Can
that.
we get a copy of the slides sent to us by email?
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
How do we get that? Is someone just going to send us out an email?
I think we can send that out in the email, and maybe that form for all the information, the vital statistics information, that might be a good thing.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
So Lily, I have a question I don't really know how to frame exactly, but you know how so my parents and grandparents prepaid for their funeral plots with that whole situation.
Yeah.
With a green burial or like a water cremation or something, is that do you foresee
your
Willow Green Funerals, for instance, is that an option? Can we do those sorts of things or not?
So you've already prepaid for your funeral. So one thing you can do, do they live locally?
Oh, no. They live somewhere else. But I'm just wondering for my own kids who are now grown
Yeah.
on, but they won't want to deal with any of this. For myself, I was just wondering because I know kind of what I would like.
Oh, okay.
I hope it's
You're
many
asking
decades
about
away.
planning. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, we will be doing pre-planning. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Definitely we will. But people who I will say, when you've already, sometimes you can plans, you can call a funeral home and say, hey, this is what I want. Here's
Yeah.
all my information. Here's all my vital statistic information. And this is what I want when I die. They will keep it in a file and you've already got a head start. You can pre-plan without having to prepay. You can prepay. And sometimes it's really important for families who are trying to, what we call spend down to qualify for Medicaid, right? I will also tell you, I think it's a great idea. If you don't need to spend down, I would say, I mean, all the advice I give you, pretty soon I'm going to have a funeral home. So I may be like, why did I tell these people all these ways to get around everything? But really, most of the time, whatever you have your money in, you're probably going to get more of a return on than giving it to the funeral home. So I would, if you don't, some people really just want to prepay because all my, like their kids all live somewhere else. They just want to take care of it. And that is totally, totally valid and do it. But it's a great idea just to know what you want, about how much it's going to cost, and have that money set aside for your kids. The funeral home doesn't necessarily have to set aside that money, right? Um, you can transfer. So let's say you've prepaid with a funeral home, and let's say you move to Florida, and you end up using a funeral home down in Florida.
Mm.
That happens all the time. You can transfer whatever you've paid that funeral home here. That can be transferred down to the funeral home that's executing in Florida. Now, it might not cover everything because you may have prepaid a certain amount, planned for this area, but you could still apply the funds that are in that account towards the funeral. So that does happen quite a bit.
Thank you.
Did you say what the cost of the water cremation was?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't say that. There's so many more. It's legal in about 28 states and it's been around for so much longer. Like the natural organic reduction is really easy because there's basically four people offering it, and I know exactly what they're charging. But what's interesting, the selection rate, there's funeral homes that will offer fire cremation and water cremation for the exact same price. And one in particular said they would get 80% of the time people would choose water cremation if it was the same price. I can tell you we plan to make water cremation a very accessible price. I mean, one of the reasons I'm studying pricing of local funeral homes is I'm trying to figure out what's the average people are charging. Um, it's Funeral homes have to have a healthy business. They have to be able to pay their staff. I can tell you when I started in funeral service, and it wasn't that long ago, I was offered $14 an hour. And you think about like the work you do. I mean, and so a lot of it's really amazing to me. So it's like, gosh, well, I want to be able to pay people more than that, but I also want to make sure the prices are really accessible to families. Um, So I'm trying to find that balance, but the plan is to make it really accessible to families and to really be in line with the average pricing in the area. So if the average pricing in this area is around, 2,700 for fire cremation, somewhere in that neck of the woods. Um, and I've talked to that main manufacturer of water cremation, and she'll tell you that in some markets people try to really make it a premium thing and really charge a high price for it, and it doesn't do as well. It's still really new to a lot of people. A lot of people haven't heard of it. I mean, I think most people haven't heard of it, right?
I ask questions about congressional because my grandfather and my great grandfather and grandmother are buried there. And I know many
Oh,
years ago they had a problem with congressional not being well kept. And so I'm
yeah.
wondering, how do I get, how to get my, how do I find them, number one, and see if they have a stone? And then how do I get a stone for them if they don't? And then how do I get, of course, genealogy records for them? And is it,
Yes.
and can I get there by metro? Because I don't have a car.
Yes. Yes and yes. Okay, so Potomac Ave Metro. Um, it's about a 3 block walk from there. Also Stadium Armory. So you can do Stadium Armory or Potomac Avenue Metro. I would, for genealogy, I would call them ahead of time because um, it's, it's a nonprofit cemetery. It's not like walking into a normal cemetery. They're planning events. They've got dog walkers. There's all kinds of, they're harvesting honey. There's like a million things going on there. Um, so I would call them ahead of time and say, I'm trying to get, it's basically the range and site number. You're trying to find out their plot information, and they would be able to look through their files and hopefully find it and be able to give you that information. You're 100% right, Lisa, that it was in rack and ruin until not too long ago. Uh, the funeral directors, the old school funeral directors would tell me stories like they would come there for a burial and bring a machete because the weeds would be like shoulder high and they would have to just like whack their way to the grave. It is not like that at all anymore. I mean, honestly, almost every photo that was in the slideshow is they're from just me being there and finding it just so beautiful. Um, and taking photos all the time, but it's beautiful. I mean, it is really a beautiful cemetery. Um, there's so much love and community, and there's lots of life in it. And I think it's a very special place, but you are totally right that it was unkept for a long time. It's still owned by Christ Church, which is an Episcopal church. It's the first Episcopal church that was on Capitol Hill. And at a certain point in history, the church realized they weren't, I guess I would be careful, but they weren't that great at running a church and a cemetery. Those are two totally different things, right? And the nonprofit, eventually did take over. In about 2011 or 2012, it became a National Historic, Register, and it started getting an endowment from Congress, and it really got, just so much better with their volunteer um, people there. And so it's really come a long way in the past, 15 years or so. And I don't see it ever going back to those hard times that it had.
What are the hours there? So I will know when to call because I have tried to call and I'm not getting really an answer. So what's a good
Oh
time for
gosh.
me to call?
I mean, they're Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Um, if you want, you send me an email. My email address is on there, and I can bug them, and I'll try to find out where your people are.
That is awesome. Thank you so much. Much
Yeah.
appreciated.
And on a pretty day in the springtime, oh, go there. It's a neat place to be. It's a special place because it's got a lot of life in it for a cemetery.
Also, all kinds of interesting programming there.
Definitely. Yeah, their event page is great.
Well, thank you so much. Anybody else have other questions? This has been so informative.
Be
And
willing to, Lily, would you be willing to come to do another presentation on this? Because I'm 99% sure that most people have not heard about this. And believe it or not, that this was kind of like what my father actually wanted. So we had two homes. We had one in the country in Southern Maryland and one here in the city. And he said he wanted his body to go back to the earth. So he wanted to be cremated and he wanted his ashes to be sprinkled down there in the country at our country home. And so we followed my father's orders, even though it was against my mom's desire for his body. Um, and that was really what he wanted. He wanted to go back to the earth. He said, I want to be a part of the earth and regrow new fruit and new vegetables. He loved to do gardening. He was a kid of the 30s. So he taught us how to garden. He taught us how to can, preserve. He taught us how to make wine, how to, nothing goes to waste in my family. Nothing goes to waste. Somehow it gets composted, turned into something else. He showed us how to compost, before it became a thing now. So this really touches my heart a great deal because I actually experienced this, but it was before all of these things were created when my dad passed away. So I thank you so much for this presentation. But if you'd be willing to do it again, please let me know, and I'll be more than willing to, kick an email to you, and hopefully you'll come and do another presentation. I would love for other people of my father's generation to be able to know that this is available for them because of their feeling of natural and their feeling of giving back to God, because that's what he felt. He said, I want to give back to God my body and use my body to grow the earth. He really meant that in his sincerity. Anyway, so I'm going to stop talking.
That was
Lisa, that's so
good.
beautiful. Thank you for sharing your dad with us. And it sounds like you are carrying his legacy forward big time.
Mhm. All right. Any other questions?
Thank you so much. This was very helpful.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you so much.
I know it's a lot of information to get your head around. So feel free to, reach out, send me an email. And it's my honor to do it. I'd be glad to do it again sometime. So
All
thank you for
right.
having me.
And when you're ready to launch, let us know.
Yeah.
I will. I will. I will. Thank you. Thank
All
you
right.
all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good night. Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Okay.
Can we stop this recording?
Yeah, let's see how we can do that.
Well, I guess it'll stop when we shut it down.
I guess so. Uh, pause, stop recording. Okay, I think I just got it.
You got it. Okay,
Yeah.
great.